Hey everybody, and welcome today to another Wiser Wednesday. Really good to have everyone on board, and really excited for the panelists we have today. So the discussion is around creating a culture of innovation. And yeah, I guess just a little bit about myself. I'm James Potton. I believe in a world of entrepreneurial success without burnout. I've got the t-shirt to prove it. It's only slightly charred. So innovation, what a topic. I believe Drucker said it, business is just one of two things, like marketing or innovation, and we're focusing on the latter today. So let me introduce the panelists, and then we'll get going. So Sue Turner, OBE, great to have you here. You're CEO of AI Governance. Sue has long dedicated herself to supporting British entrepreneurship, helping disadvantaged people improve their lives. We met whilst you were running Quartet a few years back, Sue, and actually you became someone who I could sort of lend an ear to whilst I was also running a charity. So being, or the other way around. So you were brilliant to just help me understand a bit more about what the role was and what was needed. So you took a brave move back in 2020 to do a MSc in AI and data science, and you were awarded your OBE for services to justice, social justice. So congratulations. Not spoken to you since then. You now inspire and support boards to innovate and use AI and data for profit and social impact. So great to have you here, Sue. Jules, you're an author, you've got a book. So you wrote Enlightened Business, and you're a leadership and organization consultant working with small right up through to large corporates. You're human-centered in your approach. And Enlightened Business is all about unleashing human potential. And yeah, look, we met, and this is, a number of years ago, at least 10 years ago, I think. And I was just getting into meditation then, and I started to question about how leadership could work and how leadership could be different. And your book had a lot of the answers in that for me. So thank you. And it was brilliant to have met you back then. Simon, CEO, Namensa. Simon, you've got like really interesting backstory. You had a chronic stutter as a child and went through speech therapy until you were 16. And it's the reason why you're into accessibility and inclusion now. Consequently, you were bullied. Your mother, who was a single parent, didn't know what to do and took you to martial arts class. And the bullying stopped within months. And you've been a student of 9 schools since then in ninjutsu. So, really inspiring story, and would love to hear more about your passion for accessibility today as well. So finally, Paul Corcoran, you're also MD of Interim Consult. In the 90s, you appeared on BBC's QED science program talking about your research into what was called electronic noise. There was a dog shortly after that was doing sniffing out explosives, and your family were way more impressed with that. So you decided to shift from academia into entrepreneurship, and you've been helping others do the same ever since. By the way, he's still got the recording but can't play it. So if anyone's got a spare Betamax, please loan it to him. So off we go. What an amazing panel. Just to set the mood, like a bun fight is a fun night. So jump in with questions if you want to here within the panel. We're live, so no swearing, and bad jokes are always welcome, such as, to whoever stole my copy of Microsoft Office, I will find you. You have my word. Boom. Come on, what?
You're upsetting yourself there.
I know, thank you. Right, so starting from Jules, let's do a quick intro. It's like a minute to where you are now. So what was your journey to I guess also being inspired by culture and innovation, and how you are where you are today. So Jules first, the floor's yours.
James, thanks for kicking us off there. My career took off really with just a lucky break where I was offered the opportunity to work in Silicon Valley. I joined Cisco right when it was just taking off in the late 90s. So I had that whole Bay Area experience. But at that point, although it was already, I would say, a large company, it had that startup feel. And I loved it. I thrived on it, and then joined a startup myself, which had its challenges, and it was great to grow with it, but ultimately kind of did the whole burnout thing, working in the States, just long hours for many years. And I just took a break, did a yoga teacher training, spent some time in India, and just did a really long deep dive about what's this all about. Set up on my own, continued to work with culture, which then obviously led into working with leaders, because I believe that leaders really shape organizations and really make the difference between organizations being successful or not, and whether or not they are innovative or not, it actually depends on the leaders as well. So that's where I'm at. I've been independent since 2008 now, and still loving every minute.
Awesome, great, thanks, Jules. I'll go around the screen. So next up here, I've got Simon. So
yeah, thank you for that introduction, and it's really good to be on this panel with these great and inspiring people. So, like Paul, I got out of academia in the mid 90s and got into this thing called the World Wide Web. I kind of was one of those people that said, hey, this thing is going to really revolutionize how we communicate, collaborate, and share and do things. And people thought at the time that I was, just obviously doing something different. And then it turned out to be a pretty big deal. And I had a company that actually became the largest independent web design company in the UK. And within that company, I had a user-centered design group, which is the group that actually became Nemensa. And the reason I kind of shifted from, say, the web to experience was I kind of realized, flying around the world doing internet projects for clients, that the real action, the real focus was in how we delivered experience. And at that time, the W3C started to get into accessibility. So we kind of took the group from one company and moved that into a bedroom. And, we've gone from, 3 of us to now probably over 250 people as an independent agency in the UK. So that means not so much the number, but the things that we've had to accomplish in terms of scaling and how you organize and things like that. And we're very, very proud of being very flat. So I run Nemensa in a very flat way. I don't believe in like status or privilege or those sorts of things. So it's often odd to us that when we hear about, gender imbalances and stuff like that, because we tend to be 50-50 or there's more females than males. And we kind of like, it's all about people. It's all about humanizing. So my whole thing is about the best people, wherever they come from, whatever they are important. So it's like mind power. And yeah, today user experience seems to be a very popular thing that fellow board members ask me about to help them achieve. It comes in that flavor called customer experience, but it's all experience from my perspective.
Brilliant. All right, thank you, Simon, and look forward to hearing more about that journey as well. So Paul, you're up next.
Thanks, James. I started off as an engineer, and I've had a sort of random walk of a career, is probably the best way of describing it, without any particular plan or any particular ambition. So I started off in academia, did a PhD in AI, and that was back in the 1990s, when training neural networks used to take overnight, or maybe a couple of nights, rather than sort of 10 seconds on your PC. And it's interesting to see what that's meant for artificial intelligence, in the sort of wider industry. Just by sort of through random consultancy and research, I ended up moving into industry. Worked in a number of different sectors, defence, transport, a number of different roles, board roles on FTSE, on AIM-listed businesses, SMEs. I now run my own business, Interim Consult. I was part of a large corporate, AIM Infrastructure Services. I ran their consultancy division. That was a 500 million turnover business. And if you were to ask me, how did all this start? How did I end up where I am? I've not got any particular idea. There was never any real particular plan. But one thing I've been passionate about all the way through my career is about, as an engineer in a way, is about how you take technology and how you create value from it. And when I set up Interim Consult, which is now 2 years old, it was very much a vehicle to pursue what I was interested in. And the innovation theme has been something that's been there now for a couple of years. I work with government now and with a number of industry leaders, so DFT Bays, a number of MDs and CEOs from various UK transport businesses in the main, done some work in the space sector as well. And it's interesting, you know, the types of challenges that they face in relation to innovation. Everybody wants more of it, but nobody's really quite sure how. I just find that the complexity of that and the challenge of that really interesting. So,
brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Well, look, very, absolutely core to the topic today. So look forward to hearing more from you too. And yeah, finally, Sue, obviously AI is a very innovative space right now. So yeah, tell us about your journey.
Yeah, I spent 50% of my career working for really dynamic private sector businesses and 50% working for not-for-profits. So what I try to do is cross-fertilize the best of each into the other. So that's growth and the commercial side, but cross-fertilizing that with social purpose as well. Right now, I'm chair of a professional membership organisation, as well as being non-executive director of a financial services business and running my own consultancy. And I guess sort of the common thread running through it all, apart from the purpose and value piece, is data. And I've been really frustrated in roles, that's whether I was chief executive, non-exec director or chair, just this incredible frustration that I could see data in the organisation, but we couldn't get insights from it, just sort of sat there in databases, sort of dumb and unhelpful. And I'd heard about this thing called AI. I should have been talking to Paul years ago, clearly, but I couldn't find ways to use it to unlock insights. I spoke to people at universities and they said, yeah, we don't really know how to help you either. So I then heard about the government backing a new conversion course, or series of conversion courses across the country to bring diverse talent into artificial intelligence and data science. So that's how I came to take the master's degree. And absolutely fascinating. The first 5 weeks were just intense learning to code, and then the rest of the degree was about using that in really practical ways. And so I established AI governance because I'm just really passionate about helping business people to understand what AI can do for their businesses. And it is about innovation. And my inspiration really comes from opportunities that I was lucky enough to have at quite a young age that helped me overcome disadvantage. And that's given me a real passion for shifting power, sort of those like big tech companies that have a lot of power, and then the rest of the world that has relatively little. So how we can inspire people to figure out, to innovate, to use AI pragmatically. But the key part for me is with wisdom and integrity, because AI can be used on purpose or accidentally for some very nasty purposes and to have some very negative impact. So trying to get that culture right and the acceptance right that there are these negatives, and people wanting to set up their structures and their governance so that it's about the positive impact that they want to create is really exciting to me. I don't have all the answers, but I have lots of questions, and working with boards to ask those questions and figure out where the nuances lie. It's lots of grey areas, which I find very exciting.
Brilliant, great, thank you, Sue. I think an important place to start in this discussion is, when we're talking about creating a culture of innovation, is to try and define innovation and maybe what we mean by that when we say it. So I threw that sort of question to Paul to begin with, and then obviously, others are welcome to join in. So over to you, Paul. What's innovation?
Yeah, thanks, James. It's a really important subject to define what innovation is, because there tends to be a focus on things such as product and service development, seen as being the engines of innovation. But in Interim Consult, we have a very clear definition that is innovation is turning ideas into sustainable value. And the reason we use the value term is that the value can come in many different forms. It's not just about financial. It's could be environmental, social, economic, well-being, and in reality, it's usually a mix of those things. And so if you look at innovation and the importance of increasing your capacity and capability to innovate, what that actually means is it's increasing your capability and capacity to create value. So it's a different perspective, and I think that's something around that basically unlocks the opportunity for people to innovate, because it's not prescriptive in terms of particular competence, say, in technology, that you have to innovate. Great ideas can come from anywhere, and those great ideas can turn into value in all sorts of different forms.
Yeah, that capability and capacity, like, really resonates with, a lot of, what I hear and the sort of work that I'm doing as well. And so, yeah, Simon, you talk about capability and capacity quite a lot as well. I've known you've done so in recent discussions we've had.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that, it's a tricky thing, because I think we all can recognize that innovation can be one of those words that can lose its meaning. So I think, to Paul's point, it's about showing the relevance of what innovation can do. And going back to that point about capability, what are the ways of thinking that actually help people to innovate? And I suppose for me, what I'm interested in is thinking about how people think before they start doing what they're doing. So what I mean by that is that often when I get involved with innovation, what happens is that people are doing stuff. It's like, if we make this thing, we create this feature, we will basically deliver that outcome, this impact, that benefit. And I'm one of those people that will say, okay, well, what's the human need that actually that supports? And they go, well, what do you mean, the human need? And I'm like, well, if it's going to be perceived as valuable to someone outside of us calling it a feature, what is the human need? And what I found is that when you start to think about human need as a wrapper for how you basically define and shape value, things can be quite different. I always give the example of sat with a bunch of bankers. They make money by giving people money, right? Mortgages, loans, etc. The idea is, well, people want a mortgage, and I'm like, no, they don't. No one has ever woken up ever in the history of forever and actually wanted a mortgage. They want a home. They want to change their home. They need a mortgage. Now, the point of that is, I've gone, yeah, okay, there's the need. So I'm giving them this idea of the need. The issue is the way that they present their design experience is one where they are kind of telling people what they want. And we're now becoming a little bit more enlightened and realizing, well, actually, people will tell us what they want if we could show them that it supports what they need. It's really sophisticated and really subtle. And I suppose in one way, what I'm saying is that this is the art of user experience design. It's not trying to fit something to people. It's about trying to discover what needs that they have, and then trying to make that solution, whatever it is, fit to it. So that's the way that I kind of come at innovation. But to Paul's point, I really do like that idea of value. And I think of everything in terms of relevance. Is it relevant? Does it reflect human needs?
Great, thanks, Simon. Sue, is there anything you'd like to add onto that? And also, I guess, try to define what we mean by creating a culture that nurtures innovation.
Yeah, so bring those two together. I remember when I first went to a brainstorming session in a business. This was when I was working in a private business, and the post-it notes came out, and somehow this was what the innovation was all about: filling as many post-it notes as you possibly could and sticking them all over the wall. And I hated it. I just hated this whole concept that suddenly my brain was supposed to be sparking with loads of ideas that were going to create value for the organization and solve the customer's problems. And so for me, innovation is not about post-it notes, but it is very much, as Simon was saying, they're about thinking about what is the problem we're trying to solve here. What is it that we're actually trying to do differently? And for cultures, it's, do you have that environment that's really nurturing and allows people to think the unthinkable and be unorthodox? I'll give you a couple of examples from my own experience of where it didn't work and perhaps where it has worked better. And where it didn't work was when I was working for a very dynamic, innovative private business. But it was really constrained by the boss, the shareholder, who wanted things done their way. And I had some ideas that I thought could really probe into some of the things that we were doing. So I've got a background in communications and government relations and PR, which no one else in the business had. So I thought, oh, if I can, suggest some ideas here, and we could shape something, and we could probe and see if this is what some of our customers might find useful. But the boss needed to be the expert in everything. So he was a real barrier and just did not want to know that there was someone else in the organization that could do things differently. So that was a real constraint and a barrier that made the culture, which was supposed to be innovative, actually fall flat, because nobody in the organization could release their own inner skills. The other side of it, the side that worked really well, was in the not-for-profit world, working for Quartet Community Foundation. When I first came into the organisation, we were really ambitious about what we wanted to do to help more people and communities, but we didn't have the resources. So the constraint there was lack of resources. But the people in the organisation were so passionate about what they wanted to do and the problems that they saw and how they wanted to help and overcome them, that they had this talent that they just needed to be unleashed. So what we did there was, rather than think about our lack of resources and constraints and innovate just within the resources that we had, we said, no, let's listen to the team members. Let's listen to the experiences of the people and communities that we're there for, and be inspired by that. And one of the biggest inspirations for me was listening to a woman who runs the Greater Buffalo Community Foundation in North America. And she talked about how they changed their community foundation from being a service, if you like, for wealthy individuals, for philanthropists to channel their money through to local communities. She'd flipped that on his head and said, no, we're a service for the local communities. And we know the local communities, we understand their needs better than anybody else. And then if a philanthropist wants to channel their money through us to reach those people, they can do. And we thought about this quite hard and what that would mean for us. And we consulted very widely, listened to lots of views and said, yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to be of and for our communities rather than of and for a group of wealthy people. And because we had that focus and we did research and we understood communities better than anybody else, that led to doubling the income and the capital base of the organisation, which then, going back to where I started, meant that we could do all those things that we were ambitious to do in the first place. So I think sometimes with innovation, it's about unleashing the talent of people and getting rid of those constraints and as far as you can, and then seeing what you want to do to really change the organisation. So going back to the first example, I think if the boss is the constraint, then that's a pretty tough one. You're not going to get rid of the boss. So perhaps then you need to remove yourself from that environment and go work somewhere else where your talent is actually appreciated.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sue. Yeah. I was going to mention Tesla then, but anyway. Yeah, look, there's a lovely segue towards yourself, Jules, where I'd like to sort of look at what leaders can do to nurture a culture of innovation. What are some of the things you've seen that work in organizations?
Yeah, thank you all. Sue, fantastic stories about what good bosses look like and what not so good bosses look like. And I think that first to that first point, really, it's about being the role model. That is absolutely key. Those qualities, to have the humility to listen, which it sounds like obviously that boss didn't have. So the courage to take the bold decisions, the humility to listen, the vulnerability to make mistakes, put your hand up and say, I've got this wrong. How do we basically pick ourselves up and move forward? And that's really what creates trust. And it's really difficult to lead value. Love this idea of innovating about creating value. Yes, you need, clearly you need a very strong vision, mission, and purpose. It's like, why are we here? This compelling reason for why are we getting out of bed in the morning? Something larger that people can give themselves to. And I'm coaching somebody at the moment. The question I asked her yesterday is, what would it take for you to walk away? Because the mission is great, the purpose is great, but she is working for a dysfunctional leader, sadly. But she's still not willing to give up, because the mission is so strong. She believes so strongly in the purpose that she's just like, I'm not done yet. So it's literally now about, okay, how can she find the courage to even go to board level, even though she's in her early 20s, to actually just say, look, this isn't working. So that's what leaders need to do: courage, vulnerability, humility, to build the trust, create the strong purpose and vision. And I think the final piece I would say, and this is the most challenging piece, is not to go too fast. So I think in entrepreneurial organizations and businesses, it's such a fast-paced environment. It's all about pace. It's all about time to market. It's all about how quickly can we get the new release out or the new feature out or the product to market. But actually, sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. And the richer, deeper conversations that need to take place. So it's that kind of like emergent thinking. And balancing the structured way of working with the unstructured way of thinking, that doesn't happen, naturally. It's not how we develop as children. So we enter this adult world of work, and because of our schooling and our education, we're not given this skill to rock up at work and have an empty diary and go, wow, what is today asking of me? What is it that's required of me today in this moment to move not just myself, but my people towards that bigger picture and that vision and the value that we want to create. That's challenging.
Awesome. Thanks, Jules. Yeah, it reminds me of a recent discussion actually where one of the panelists was saying, it's not waking up with your to-do list, but you're waking up with your to-be list. So who does the organization need you to be? And I think it's really powerful. Something I've been sort of toying with the last few weeks is a concept. And it completely changes your mindset in the sense that actually, you sometimes have to put away the person that you were to become the person you need to be. So it's a really powerful sort of process. Paul, what do you see? Where do you see leaders going wrong in this process of?
It's interesting because I think there are three things that we sort of identified as being important for leaders to effectively enable. One of those is about providing that purpose and value alignment. So, mastering that, creating that. And people have different styles. There's no one best way or, no one better way or no worse way. But, creating that sense of purpose amongst our business or amongst a team is really important. There has to be a leaning towards people orientation. Okay, so people in terms of, cultivating them, the way that they collaborate, the way that they work within the organisation, the way they work with their customers, the way they work with their suppliers. There has to be a sort of people orientation element to that. But the one thing I just want to touch on is following on from what Jules was saying a moment ago, which is about leaders, and what's a really important attribute. Because I think one of the key things, if you want to lead an innovative organisation, is you've got to be able to create effectively a learning organisation capability. And it's really hard because in terms of a leader, you often talk about accountability and say, what are people accountable for? When I've been in that horrible position in the past, we've not necessarily been a founder, but having walked into an organisation where no matter what you do, it's just not going to work out. You can't fix it, and you're just a victim of circumstance. Okay, and you could just be in the wrong place at the wrong time, with almost an insurmountable challenge. But for me in that situation, okay, it's difficult to say you're accountable for the results. But what I probably should be held accountable to, and leaders should be held accountable for, is actually creating a learning organisation so that no matter where you are, at least you can take it to the next state. And unless you're negligent, or dishonest, then that's a discussion for the realm of politics. Then there aren't really, often as not, there's only so much you can do, because the types of challenges you face when you go into organisations, big or small, they're complex. They're systematic. If you want to get a different result, you have to change the system, and you're one part of that. As a leader, you're one piece of that machine. But you get cultures, you get micro cultures. You can only do so much.
Yeah, no, that's great, Paul. Thank you. Does anyone else want to jump in before I move the topic forwards, or
go
for it, someone?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that were said there around, the characteristics of leadership, and I've taking my own personal perspective. I kind of recently come across this concept of Shepherd CEO. And the more I read about it, I thought, well, that's what I do. It's like I lead without having to tell people what to do. I kind of show them the bits that they can copy. And that means, for example, if they don't do something in the way that I would expect it to be done, it's fine. Sometimes they ask me, would you do it like that? And I'm like, no, because I believe in profound honesty. And they say, well, but why aren't we going to do it in the way that you want to do it? And I said, because we're going to do it in the way you want to do it. And what I found is that way of thinking is what I would call collaborative. And that collaborative way of thinking encourages learning. So, to Paul's point, you have to, I think, in, the kind of digimodern 21st century, you have to create a strong learning capability. It has to be something that is baked in and continually, reinforced. And I think, from what Sue and from what Jules said, to me, those are very clear characteristics of organizations that are trying to create psychological safety, which is the complete opposite of blame, which is why sometimes things don't work out, because people are blaming each other, or if you're a partner or a supplier or a consultant, they're blaming you. I'm just one of those people that's quite upfront. I just get these things straight out in the open. My idea is, to Paul's point, the best ideas could come from anywhere, and 9 times out of 10, they're not necessarily mine. So encouraging that kind of way of thinking, that kind of way of innovating is a way that I sneakily make sure that I'm continually learning, that I'm continually pushing myself by looking at how other people kind of solve problems and think about things. It's sort of helped me kind of be a self-confessed learner tool. I love the potential that people have. So limiting their potential seems to me anti-innovative.
Great.
That point about blame and innovation, I think, is really, really important. I mean, blame kills innovation. In an organisation, there's probably no, if you like, no soft way of really saying that. Mistakes do happen. They're going to happen. Not everything you do is going to lead to success, despite your best efforts. When it comes to innovation, everything involves risk. There's as much likelihood of failure, as there is a success. But it does come down to this point. When those things are changing, is your organisation continually learning?
Can we explore and going back to your point a little bit earlier, the learning organisation, Paul, I like to the model of the learning board as well. So how does the start from the top, like all areas of the business? It's so important, and it's like having a board that's got its antennae, not horns. Listening to the outside world is super important. Something that I'm confused with, that sort of sits with me as a paradox, is we're told that we're most innovative in wartime, and that to me feels more like a burning platform and barking up the hill kind of style of leadership than it is the safe place. I don't know. Sue, Jules, have you got thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's easier to change culture when there is something desperate pushing you forward, and the leaders there are recognising that they don't have all the answers, and they are open to creating that, as Simon said, that psychologically safe place for people to share their ideas. I'll give you an example of that. At the financial services organisation, where I'm a non-exec director, we've had to change from being an organisation with over 100 years of history of just doing one thing, providing insurance for a particular part of the community, to saying actually the best interests of that community are about them being able to change massively over the next few years. So how can we facilitate that change? And so we talked about, as a board, we talked about being a learning organisation. And now the rubber's really hitting the road, because there's ideas that are being brought forward, there's pilots that have been done internally in the organisation, and some of them work and some of them don't. And I keep having to remind the rest of the board members that, hang on, we said we'd allow for failure. So we've got to allow for failure. We can't be sort of berating anybody because, a particular idea has wasted some money. Let's not look at it as wasted money. Let's look at it as money we spent on learning.
Yeah.
And it's that whole thing about how you really mean it and put people in the situation where they can get that creative edge to them. And there's a lovely example from the AI world. It actually goes back to 2017, so it's not a new one, but there's a Harley Davidson sales outlet, if you like, in New York. I'm not a customer, I should say, but they decided to analyze their customer data using a fairly simple machine learning tool to see what were the characteristics of their most successful and most high spending customers. And they then built a model on that. And then they used that model to look at new customers coming onto their website to figure out where were the potential next generation of high spending customers. And because of this fairly simple way of looking at things, they realized that they could actually increase their sales leads by 3,000%. Wow, you know, which of us wouldn't want a 3,000% increase in sales leads? And that then, of course, led to other innovations in the business. But, you know, that for them was quite revolutionary to try this tool, which not many people were really talking about in that sort of environment in 2017, and then let it lead them into new avenues. And again, it's as Jules was saying, it's that humility to allow yourself as a leader to be led somewhere, and as Simon was saying, not somewhere where you've already thought you were going to go, but to follow what other people are doing. That I think is when the real culture change can happen.
Brilliant, thanks, Sue. Yeah, Jules, I guess, yeah, where's your thoughts? It's almost like you need a catalyst, but then you need safety. It's almost like you need both, huh?
You do, and this is the real challenge. You know, that phrase burning platform, I remember talking to an MD of a small entrepreneurial company who 3 months into COVID was on the phone going, this is amazing. This is where the team, the team is now where I've been wanting them to be for the last, 3 years. Why couldn't they have got here earlier? Why are they now working in a way that they needed to be, and that I knew they had the potential to be? And critically, how do I sustain this? Because this crisis will pass, and I don't want them to go back into safe zone. Yeah. And it was a really good conversation. And I just said, okay, well, obviously, firstly, let's start with you. What's changed in you and how you're approaching it? But I think to pick up on the learning organization, I think to have a learning organization, you have to have people who are comfortable being stretched and who want to learn. And that's going to be different for every individual. And what I'm noticing at the moment is that leaders are scared to push their people. They're scared because it's a really tight, obviously the employment market is really tight. I was again running a session last night. This is a massive global tech organization that was on the leading edge of technology, Gartner sweet spot and all the rest of it. And these are middle managers who are saying, I'm scared to lose my best people. I'm scared to push them. I'm scared to ask more of them because they might leave, and we've got a hiring freeze. And how do you create a learning organization with that fear? So you have to overcome that fear and just say, actually, you can't treat everybody the same. So this whole idea of fairness, fairness is such a big theme at the moment in terms of how do we treat our people fairly. And what I say is, you cannot, as leaders, you can't be scared to push your people. If you are going to create a learning organization, you have to be willing to stretch your people, to grow them to the best of their capability, to the best of their potential. That's going to look different for every person. So fairness doesn't mean treating everybody the same. It means stretching everybody to the edge of what they're capable of. And that's the fairness, is what your expectation is, the best that everybody can give. And that was the final piece I really wanted to pick up on. What Paul said is the accountability has to be for what people are contributing. Are they giving of their best? Are they stretching themselves? Not necessarily largely out of control, which was a really valid point, Paul.
Great, thanks, Jules. And I guess, if we start to sort of segue towards creating a sort of change culture, in my experience, as with most things, it's a journey. The innovative muscle needs to be sort of grown over time. We found, so we went from, as a business grows, I always liken it to the age of the number of people to the age of it, as it were. So, toddler, early stages, 2-3 people, you get to sort of, 6, 7, 8, it starts to sort of, grow up a bit, and then you start to get to the typical teenage years. And it was around the difficult teenage years that we'd gone from just head down, do as a team, because we were just trying to, establish ourselves, get market share, that type of thing. And then suddenly we turned around to the team and said, okay, we do want to start doing some creativity, but how do we do it in a maybe incorrectly, but in a slightly controlled way? And we played around with the 20% time that Google had, but in a controlled way, where we did it on a set day. It was called Your 24. We prepared before it. What was the thing that you're going to be working on? Who do you need? What capability do you need in that team to be able to achieve it, and so on. So, but and the first one was okay, but not brilliant, and they started to get better and better. But I guess to Paul, what's your experience in bringing about that? It's almost like the alchemy, isn't it? It's making the fixed volatile and the volatile fixed. So,
but it's interesting about creating the burning platform, because I think there are examples where you do get that, if you like, top-down element of a burning platform that can change the innovation state of a business. So a project I worked on a few years ago, when I arrived to take it forward, it just needed marshalling. Loads of really bright guys, lots of good ideas. It just needed bringing together, and we honed in on, said, right, we've made a promise to the customer. We will deliver this system, this complex, piece of technology on this date. We had a burning platform. And so we all pushed towards that. And it was amazing how much innovation there is. And it's one of those things, because I think what actually happens is there's actually that paradox you talked about is it's really about how to sustain the burning platform once you put the fire out. Because actually what you get when you've got a burning platform is, often as not, you are delegating the authority to act down to the grassroots level. Because if they know what the goal is, they will take the action without fear of retribution. And so there is a bias to action. And what happens is, when you've solved that problem, when you've got over that line, that's the hard bit, because then you say, well, how do you sustain it? How do you create that thing, that Jules was just saying that, that you're looking for? How do you maintain that? It's really difficult, because people can burn out, and you do get that I'm over the line sort of feeling as well with it. And I think it's one of the early points as well, is sometimes this is just about pacing things properly. But there are definitely times when you can create that, sense of purpose through a burning platform that doesn't inhibit innovation. But the difficult bit is, what does it mean for the innovation legacy once you've put the fire out? No,
it's Simon, if you get brought in, quite often at the front edge of a project when they're trying to bring in, change. What's your, what's the trigger or the catalyst normally for you being, someone picking up the phone and giving you a call?
It's essentially that what they want to do is they want to deliver better customer experience, because they know that that's now correlated with better performance, better interaction with their customers. So that's a given. The challenge is how they go about it. So what can be difficult is when you have to explain to people that it's not about features, it's not even about products, and it's not even about services. It's about what people believe and what they need. So what I tend to do is often use stories and comparisons as a way to get people to rethink how they're thinking about experience design, because often people think experience design is the user interface. And, I'm trying not to burst into laughter when I think about that, but I'm kind of like, no, it's not the user interface. It's much bigger than that. And I want to go back to something that you said. So we say, we're talking about creating a journey. So what I'll say to people is, well, yeah, of course. And let's say that journey is amazing, and it leads you to what I call the view from the top of the mountain. And let's say that mountain is Mount Everest. Wouldn't that be the most amazing view ever? Of course, that would be the most amazing experience in the world ever. And they're all like, yes, of course, that is the experience that we want. And I'm like, okay, but to get your customers to get that experience, they need to get there. And then they need to get back from there. And they're like, Simon, what are you talking about? And I'm saying there is critical interaction and things that people do before they go on that journey and things they do after that journey. And the journey is much bigger than you think it actually is, and actually has a lot of other journeys involved. And I do that by kind of trying to explain that what they want to achieve is really, really, really complex. And experience design is really, really complex. You know, it's a systemizing way of thinking. And the other example I give them, and it's really relevant to the pandemic, I kind of say, right, is you're trying to solve a complex problem, and you really don't know kind of how to do that, or you're going about it in a way where you're not going to achieve it. And that can sound condescending or patronizing. And I kind of have to lead them to this point of, what are the hard problems that this complex problem is made up of? Because maybe those are the things that you can start to tackle. And actually, by giving people the confidence to tackle those things, you start to address what the complex problem might be. And if you think about what we've gone through creating vaccines for a virus, which is part of a family of viruses, which we've been studying as a species since the sort of end of the 1930s, it was, exactly to your point, an event that led to a whole bunch of nations around the world coming up with that solution. Now, that is a complex problem solution. That problem could not have been fixed if, for example, we didn't know the structure of DNA. So the mapping of DNA is a hard problem that allows us then to solve a more complex problem of vaccine design. And the issue is, what I'm often explaining to people is, you cannot jump over the hard problems to get to achieve the complex problem. You just can't do it. And it's difficult because, they want to go fast. They want to get there. But what I kind of tend to say is, look, if we could solve some of these hard problems, what you might unlock, as Sue said, is quite incredible value, both from a customer perspective and actually from a business perspective. And to Paul's point, value for me is it's like a marriage between the business and its market. It's super relevant, and the business is successful because it's able to understand and deliver need in often a new and innovative way that allows the business to grow in an often new and innovative way. So it's not one thing or another, but a relationship. And I think it comes down to really trying to address hard problems. So, people talk to me about innovation and I just go, yeah, that's great. What are the hard problems you're trying to solve? And I kind of go at it from that perspective. So I break innovation down into things that I feel can be manageable by elements of an organization.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Simon. It might be a nice segue, Sue, to yourself, because what we're finding with machine learning and AI is we're able to understand problems better than we used to. So what's your thoughts on the potential or the possibility as a result of the advancement in ML and AI?
For me, I think there's huge changes we're going to see over the next few years. Just like we couldn't imagine back in the early 1990s what difference the internet was going to make to our businesses. And the same now, we can't really imagine what difference over the next 5 or 10 years AI is going to make. But I think it will make a big difference to how we see problems. So we'll still be aware of, say, a business issue, but how we see it, because we're looking through the lens of data, I think will change a lot. And I'm not talking about artificial general intelligence coming along and solving all the problems for us. I still think the human brain is going to be brilliant at looking at subtle things and nuances. But I think the main issue that really though holding us back is that understanding of what these, not just AI, but other tools can do for us. So we might have a good picture of the problem, but not looking at new tools that we could use to solve it. And there was a government survey that came out back in January that said only 15% of UK businesses are using any AI tool yet. And the main reason that most businesses are not using any is because the leaders don't understand it. They don't know that fundamentally it's about finding patterns in data and using those patterns to predict, to personalize, to automate. When you break it down as simply as that, and when I go in and talk to companies and I say, what do you want to be able to predict, to personalize, or to automate? And they can come up with ideas, no problem at all. But I think the other thing really is about I hope, maybe this is me just being wishful thinking, but about shifting power. So rather than saying the power is in the hands of a few, when we unlock the power of data and we unlock some of these tools, then lots more people can start to innovate and use them. But it's as you were saying, James, it's about being persistent, isn't it? Because the first time we do it, it's probably going to fall over, not quite do what we wanted. So how do we persist and use those untapped talent in our organisations to keep moving forward? And I think for me, the one key to that is mentors or non-exec directors or sounding boards, somebody from outside the business that's like a shoulder to cry on, or somebody to G you up when things aren't going well, so that you can sort of say, yeah, I am on the right path. I just need to keep that persistence going and keep learning.
Awesome, great, thanks, Sue. Anyone want to jump in on that?
I think there's a really interesting link there between what Sue and Simon have just said about, sorting out these hard problems that then can solve the complex problem. Because, the example with, DNA profiling and vaccines is a really good example. But coming back to Sue's, and to be fair, it's this thing up there with the first-hand experience of, developing AI solutions on computers that took days, to do the things that now take seconds. That hard problem of accelerating, and increasing the power and the memory of processors, and we're not even into things like quantum computing yet, which is going to be another leap, from where we are now. That has unleashed the capability for, the types of data analytics and the type of AI work. And that was a hard problem that's been solved. And now you can move on to the next one and the sorts of things that Sue was talking about.
Yeah. We could take it in a number of directions with, Web3 and metaverse, multiverse and so on. There's lots coming through. Maybe, it's interesting. I think if we could just, I guess there's like a little bit more I'd like to do on like the culture, and then we'll look at sort of where innovation is going. And maybe back to you, Jules. There's a difference in innovating in a company between it's just an individual innovating and then cross collaboration. Is there something there that you've seen? Again, this is how do we spark that? It's almost the skunk works, isn't it? It's known as, where you have a small team who go off and work on something that then can proliferate through the organization. But what's your should innovation start with one, then two, then three, or should what have you seen work in the work that you do?
I think it's about having the infrastructure in place to be able to share the ideas and then invite input and collaboration as early on in the process. The later on down the line it gets, the more difficult it is for people to then be able to contribute. And that becomes tricky from an organizational structure perspective. Obviously, it depends on the size of the organization. But this, it's how quickly can ideas be disseminated and then built upon, so that the richness is enhanced. And this is obviously, like why diversity is so important, and having different voices in the room. And if the diverse voices aren't in the team, where can they come from? I was struck by Simon's. I just happened to be on the LinkedIn site. A beautiful story of a Namibian practice of how women go out into the bush and listen to an unborn baby's song. Now, imagine if that story was told, and what that could spark in terms of, well, what need are we looking to address? And let's just bring in a story that may have nothing to do with the problem that we think we're trying to solve, but just see what it sparks. And this is what I mean by creating the time and space.
Yeah.
So let's do a number of people, so much as the practices that are in place to facilitate really rich, imaginative dialogue and discussion. And for me, I just have to say this, that the technology is great, but I really, Sue's thing around wisdom and integrity is, how do we hold on to our humanity? How do we grow and use technology to serve humanity, not have humanity serve the machine? And that for me has to be the ethos that runs through any innovative practices. And from a culture perspective, in terms of the bedrock of any innovative culture, if you want to do it with wisdom and integrity, that kind of, for me, has to be a mantra that leaders have to establish from the outset.
Amazing, Jules. Thank you. Yeah, it's that recent post I put up about the sentient bots from Google is really, it sent shivers down my spine, even though it's, we're not there yet, but it's a warning shot across the bow of bow that we'll be there, So we're not at the singularity, but we're traveling fast towards it. So in the last few minutes, Simon, just be really interested, and again, it's a segue, Jules, from what you've just been discussing around diversity, and Simon, your interest in accessibility, and where do you see the future of innovation and design going?
Then I suppose I have to take this with the fact that I'm an idealist at heart. So I'd like to think that it will go in a more inclusive way. So I think it's absolutely imperative now more than ever before that we ensure that we design for all, because we're all important. And I think that point that Jules made around fairness is really subtle but super relevant, in the sense of one person's fairness may be another person's unfairness. Now that doesn't, it's not binary. I think that's the point that Jules was making from my interpretation, and I think about what Paul was talking about in terms of learning, and then about Sue thinking about in terms of boards and how we think of them in that way. You can flip this idea of cognitive diversity on its head. So I don't mean diversity, ethical diversity, where we're talking about gender, religion, or stuff like that. Those things are super important. Of course, that goes without saying. I'm talking about how people think, as Jules said, in trying to embrace different people to think in different ways. And we know that when we can combine people in different ways, what we get is much greater innovation. And for me, ensuring that we design in an inclusive way means that we are not going to leave behind or exclude through ignorance people that can add so much. I mean, you go back 50 years and we wouldn't be able to basically appreciate the genius and wisdom of Stephen Hawking, but we can through technology. We have to make sure that technology doesn't exclude people. So I think making sure that everything that's designed, I hope, through technology should empower people more. I mean, especially digital technology, there's a real opportunity to ensure that we can design things that everyone can use in a way that's really difficult to retrofit in the physical world. We don't have to go through those problems with digital technology. So from my perspective, encouraging everybody is really important, because whilst we might not be able to agree, because it's so interesting on what innovation is or what the value of innovation might be, from the simple perspective of exclusion, we can agree what that feels like, and it feels bad. And you don't need a PhD in psychology to be able to work that out. So from my perspective, innovation is designing with a sense that everybody can do something. And I'll leave you with this idea that we think about a lot is what we call situational accessibility. So people will say, yeah, but you're designing with people with different, they say disabilities. This is still used today. I don't use that word. I use the word abilities, because we all have different abilities. And as you know, I have, apart from being a man, many disabilities. So the point is that, can you imagine a parent on the bus carrying their child, trying to send a message to their partner about doing something? Well, it's going to be really difficult to do it with one hand. That's a situational environment that a lot of people have been in, that I've been in, where it's very difficult to do all these things at the same time. So being able to design technology so that it can support interaction in different ways, all that sort of situational perspective is what I mean about designing for inclusion, about thinking much bigger in a more systemizing way than the user interface or what we want someone to do. So I think that in the future, what we'll see is this much greater push towards inclusive design, which is, you know, a huge, gnarly, hairy, wicked problem, but one that I'm still happy to take on.
Fantastic, thanks, Simon. Hey, look, we're just running out of time now. So in the last last minute or so, I just want to quickly go around the room. If you could wind the clock back 30 years, what advice would you give yourself? In less than 20 words on how you could have been more creative, or how what is it that you've seen that you wish you knew 30 years ago? So let's, Paul, you go first, and we'll quickly go around the room.
Yeah, I think for me, having an engineering background, I think what I learned sort of later in my career was that innovation isn't just about service and product development. Now, there's lots of different forms of innovation and lots of different value that can be created. It's not just about the engineering and the technology. In fact, it's very often not at all about the technology.
Awesome, thank you, Paul. Sue?
I was offered 2 jobs when I first graduated, and one of them was a trainee computer programmer. I wish I could go back and offer my young self the advice to take that job, because you never know where it's going to take you.
Awesome, thank you. Jules?
Not to be limited by limiting self-beliefs. So, my limiting self-belief was I don't do science. I'm from the arts, I'm a linguist. I don't do maths. Absolutely rubbish. And so don't carry those stories through.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Jules. And Simon?
It's a really good question. I think to be less righteous with what you're thinking, and to be more empathetic with what others can help you see and understand. I think if I could, that's how I do it now. But if I could go back, that's definitely what I would be saying. Shut up and listen.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Yeah, and with all these things, it's easy to say and so hard to do. Hey, I don't know why, but it just is. It's a weird, that's the journey as a human being, I guess. So look, there you have it. Really, really interesting topic and discussion today, and thank you to all the panelists. Understanding the hard problems to solve the complex is, what we need to go through. For tech to serve humanity, not the other way around, and for tech to serve all. And have courage, vulnerability, and humility. So hope you've enjoyed today. Hope you feel a little bit wiser than you did before on this Wednesday. If you want to see other podcasts and versions of this, then go to WiserWednesday.com. Next one's on the 20th of July, all around founder fundraising in stagflation. And yes, we will explain what stagflation is. So look, thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much to the panelists. So little round of applause. Well done all.
Thank you.
Thank you.